Euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a life in order to relieve pain and suffering. Many euthanasia cases deal with incurable and painful diseases or irreversible comas. In the majority of countries, euthanasia or assisted suicide is against the law. There are two main classifications of euthanasia: voluntary and involuntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia is euthanasia conducted with consent of the patient and has been legalized in Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Oregon, and Washington. Involuntary euthanasia is euthanasia conducted without consent. The decision is made by another person because the patient is incapable of doing so himself or herself. There are also two procedural classifications of euthanasia: passive and active euthanasia. While passive euthanasia is simply refraining from doing anything to keep the patient alive, active euthanasia is taking some positive action designed to kill the patient.
Some options that are available other than euthanasia for those in pain or are in an incurable physical condition are palliative care, refusing treatment, and a living will. The World Health Organization defines palliative care as an approach that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing the problems associated with life-threatening illnesses, through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, physical, psychological, and spiritual. Another legal option in the USA and many other countries is refusing treatment. Refusing treatment is when a patient can refuse treatment that is recommended by a doctor or healthcare professional, as long as they have been properly informed and are of sound mind. Also, a living will, which must be made in advance, is a legally binding document which anybody may draw up in advance if they are concerned that they will not be able to express their wishes at a later date.
I say to distinguished members of the government in this instance that we all know that every year thousands of people die surrounded by their families while doctors do their best to ease their pain. Sometimes, I suspect, pain relief hastens death, and for all we know, in some cases there may even be a private understanding between the doctor and the patient not to prolong things when the end is near. And I say, good on people for being so sensible about these very delicate situations. These are matters that should be left to the good judgment and the common sense of individuals, their families, and the people who want the best for them. I think we should be slow to think that our wisdom is so much deeper than that of every previous generation that now we want to offer euthanasia to people at the very time when we have more capacity to relieve pain than ever before. But I fear that too much of this is really about easing the pain of relatives or of doctors who would rather not have to live with complex responsibilities.
When asked the question, at what point do you think life is worth living? We received a variety of responses. Ross Tanaka thought that if there is a chance that you're able to interact with people you care about, and if you can properly express what you feel and what you want in any shape or form, like writing, then it is worth living. Colin Birch believes that life is always worth living. Sure, life sucks now and then, but you can recover. Just because you lost your sight, you're very ill, or in pain, does not mean you should give up on life. The only time he may consider that life is not worth living is in a vegetative state. But like he said before, people have recovered miraculously. Caitlin Fisher said, "I think that life is no longer worth living when you're completely incapable of doing something on your own and must have somebody constantly taking care of you. Also, life is not worth living when you no longer experience any sort of happiness or comfort."
During our interview, we asked, is it ever right to end the life of a terminally ill patient who is undergoing severe pain and suffering? And is killing someone morally worse than letting someone die? Lucia Malgos said, "I believe it is the right to end the life of someone who wants their life to end. No one should play God with people's lives, though, through and decide for them. But if they are in excruciating pain that will get worse over time and will die either way, it is okay to take that life." It's morally worse to let the person suffer than ending it for them. Samantha Chu replied, "If it is with the consent, it is fine. If they don't say anything in the past, if they want to die, then it's fine. It is morally worse if they are saying, please kill them. You're not curing their soul, just trying to cure them physically. Better to cure them spiritually, and then better than letting them suffer." Colin Birch said, "I do not think it ever is right to kill a terminally ill patient just because they are in pain. If the doctor can somehow alleviate the pain, then he should. But if it's out of his hands, then there is nothing that can be done. Just letting someone die is not worse than killing someone. If there is no way for the person, letting someone die actually had no power to help the situation. Euthanasia is not helping them. It's ending whatever chance someone would have to recover."
And talk about power to the people. Joining us from his home in Kent, Washington, is a man suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. This former Boeing computer programmer has been told that he has only months to live, but John Payton is using that time to accomplish a mighty task. John, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
John, first of all, how are you doing? I know you have only a few short months to live. Are you in pain right now as you're doing this interview?
No, pain is not normally a component of Lou Gehrig disease. My breathing difficulties give you an indication of what I'm in for. We typically die from pulmonary insufficiency.
Well, John, I want to know how a man with only a few months to live decides to focus on one task, and you're focused on defeating Washington State's ballot initiative that would allow for so-called death with dignity, which is assisted suicide. Why that issue?
Well, I'm one of those people who is somewhat a target of the initiative, and I don't know how we as a society could really consider making doctors into killers. And that's what we're really doing with this. A physician writes a prescription for a lethal dose of medicine. He becomes an accomplice in suicide. He's really assisting in the killing of an innocent human being.
And John, I think a lot of people who are for this type of assisted suicide would say, look, well, what about the quality of life? I mean, look, people suffering like you, what kind of quality of life do you really have? What do you say to those people?
I have a marvelous quality of life. Right now I'm totally dependent. I can do nothing for myself. I'm effectively paralyzed. But I have a family, I have friends, I have my church community, I have loving support all around me. I don't understand how anyone could deny that I have a very high quality of life. And it gives me to understand and be compassionate toward those without the support that I have. But rather than giving them the temptation to kill themselves, we should be trying to figure out how to help them have the quality of life that I enjoy.
Well, John, your family must be so proud of you. I'm trying to hold back the tears right here, right now, but what an amazing life lesson of every moment on this earth. We all have something to give, and every life, no matter how compromised or medically compromised are the challenges, every single life is worth protecting and to be cherished. And I just want to say this is the best segment of this show, and this is the best segment of this whole week because you were on it, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for just being there. As long as you're here, thank you.
You're quite welcome, Laura, and thank you for helping me get the message out.
Absolutely. God bless you.
When proposed the question, do you think active and/or passive euthanasia is morally wrong? Sean Awakuni replied, I think both passive and active euthanasia can be morally okay as long as it ends suffering in some way. I feel as though if someone chooses to be freed from pain and misery for the remainder of their life, they should have the choice to do so. Contrarily, Nick Fannin says that it is morally wrong because life is precious and you have to figure out why they don't want to live and try to fix it. Kelly Matsura replied that it depends on the situation. If a person is in the right state of mind, says, I don't want to be in pain, I don't want to be living in pain, then yes, it is okay to move on. It is okay with their consent. If you don't know the wishes of the patient, then the circumstance can be a bit trickier.
Letter O, letter U.
7 years ago, Tony Nicholson was a healthy 51-year-old man.
He's the life and soul of the party. He's a big bloke, ex-rugby player. He worked hard, but he played hard. He was, full of life, great sense of humour, loved the sound of his own voice. Hot, aren't you?
Then he suffered a stroke. Today, the man who loved life is fighting for the right to end it.
My name is Tony Nicholson and I have locked-in syndrome. This means that most of my body is paralysed, but my mind is as it was before the stroke. All I can move is my head, and the stroke took away my power of speech. Now I talk to people with a Perspex spelling board or a computer operated by my eye blinks. My day typically begins at 5 a.m. I need only 4 or 5 hours sleep because I lead a very sedentary life. I watch television until 8:30 when the first of the carers come. During this time, my wife checks on me at 7:30, and between then and 8 o'clock she gives me my drugs and juice for breakfast. These drugs are only to make my life more comfortable, as I have refused all drugs that are designed to prolong my life since 2007. Unfortunately for me, tomorrow will be exactly the same, and the next, and the next. Ad infinitum until the day I die.
If you were given the right to make that decision, would you choose to do so?
Yes.
But under British law, Tony doesn't have that right. He's physically incapable of committing suicide, and it's illegal for anyone to help him. At present, so-called voluntary active euthanasia, when assistance is required to end a life, constitutes murder, and the sentence is life imprisonment. Tony has taken his case to the High Court in Britain, saying he's not looking for a new law allowing euthanasia. He simply wants a remedy to the current legislation, which he calls discriminatory.
Some people have in the past spoken to me in the loud, slow and deliberate tones normally reserved for the deaf or daft. I am neither. All too often well-meaning, able-bodied people just assume that if a person is so severely disabled that he needs assistance to commit suicide, he must automatically be unable to deal with such a choice. I say that where a person has the mental ability, he should have the choice of his own life or death. The only difference between you and me is my inability to take my own life without assistance.
Tony's condition hasn't changed for 7 years, and he and his wife say the longer the court takes to rule on his appeal, the longer his only hope for relief is postponed.
I think the injustice of it all, you or I can go out and take our lives at any time we want, whereas Tony, being the one that really needs that right, can't do this, and he's only asking for what everyone else has got, really, to, his right to take his own life. He wants that giving back to him.
The High Court is expected to issue its judgment in Tony's case after the end of July. As difficult as things are for them, Jane says she and Tony have never had any doubts that assisted suicide is the right choice for them.
It's taken so long to get to this point, and he's never ever wavered, and it is what he wants. It's what he wants desperately. So if it's what he wants, it's what we want.
Diane Pretty was a 42-year-old woman with a motor neuron disease who wanted to commit suicide but was too disabled to do so, and therefore wanted her husband to end her life instead, with the consent of English law. She made a final plea for the right to die with dignity at the European Court of Human Rights. Diane Pretty argued that she had the right to respect for private life and bans inhumane and degrading treatment. She should be allowed to die with dignity rather than face the distressing final stages of the disease. Her lawyers argued that she was facing a humiliating and degrading death that would be distressing and undignified, and that she wishes to avoid such a death. She would be free to do so if she were physically capable of taking her own life unassisted. After the hearing, Mrs. Pretty, 43 years of age with 2 children who can only speak with the help of a voice synthesizer, said, "I just want my rights."